These images from a 1970s brochure for Xerox show office workers beaming as they tap away at their personal computers. Their cheer belies the difficulty of using a computer half a century ago. Back then, most computers relied on the user's knowledge of the command line, where they had to type in the exact command for the computer to execute. This process meant there was a high barrier to using a personal computer. This all changed with the invention of the GUI, or Graphical User Interface. In Genesis, God created all the animals. Since no one else was around, he tasked Adam with naming all of them. It is often the case that the creators of new technology must create language for concepts that do not exist. When this happens, language influences technology, and often that language can stick around for a long time.
Years of innovation, pioneering the electronic office of tomorrow, making dreams a reality.
In the 1970s, a revolution was occurring that would shape the history of computing. Researchers at Xerox PARC in 1973 created the Alto, now recognized as the first GUI. The GUI allows users to interact with a computer using visual elements instead of typed commands. The Xerox Alto was experimental and never made it to the consumer. It was Apple's 1984 Macintosh, with its affordable price and killer design, that brought the GUI to the masses. We are going to look at some of the earliest GUIs, specifically the 1984 Macintosh, and look at the ways its creators forged new metaphors from the language around them. We'll see if this paradigm holds true today and if it will stick in the future. Unlike text-speak, early computer slang that evolved organically, the language of the GUI was intentionally designed. The core idea of the Macintosh was a user interface that was clear and simple, bringing entirely new concepts to people for the very first time.
Now, we've done a lot of talking about Macintosh recently, but today, for the first time ever, I'd like to let Macintosh speak for itself.
GUIs use the setting of the 20th century office to bring everyday office supplies to the computer screen. In a way, the GUI itself is a metaphor. It provides an easy way to navigate the lower-level complexity of a computer's inner workings. So how is the real world used as a template for Macintosh? The linguist Monica E. Brundle maps out two theories that can be used to analyze computing metaphors. The first is the classical approach, where one thing, X, is comparable to another thing, Y, in some aspect, Z. For example, the folder. It is comparable to a real manila envelope because we use both to store files. In reality, computer files are just lines of code stored somewhere on the computer. There is no real folder. Other examples are the window or the trash can. Another theory is the cognitive approach. A target domain is mapped onto a source domain to create a wealth of metaphorical language. Let's look at an example. A word processor, the target domain, is modeled on the way people once edited documents by hand, using physical tools, the source domain. This analogy generates familiar metaphors, cutting, pasting, highlighting, that translate manual editing techniques into the digital realm. By grounding the interface in an already understood activity, designers made it easier for users to intuit how digital document editing works. Other examples would be mapping the computer onto domains like food, from which we get cookies or Easter eggs, or comparing the computer to a human, which gives us metaphors like memory or virus. Some early GUIs took the metaphor of computer screen equals real world to the extreme. An early program called Microsoft Bob, for example, recreated an entire room for its interface. It never took off. There was also Magic Desk, a cartridge for the Commodore 64 that tried to get in on the GUI trend. Instead of a mouse, Magic Desk was operated with a joystick and relied on a direct visual metaphor of a work desk. For the Macintosh and its predecessor, the Lisa, Apple took a different approach. The Macintosh tasked itself with bringing the computer to the masses, and an important part of that was a strong visual language. Susan Kerr, a sculptor from Ithaca, New York, was hired as the designer for the original icons used by the Macintosh. Although she had no design experience, she used her knowledge of needlepoint to design 32 by 32 pixel icons that became, well, iconic. Kerr looked from cross-stitch to mosaics for inspiration. Some of her icons were very abstract or symbolic, like the command key, which was inspired by a Swedish campground symbol, meaning interesting feature. Others featured more direct metaphors. In this interview, she uses analogies to familiarize the audience with the features of the Macintosh's interface.
Susan, you're an icon designer, among other things, and have you learned something from the experience on Lisa as to the effectiveness of icons, how to use them, and how they fit in?
Well, certainly, I think one of the best experiences is seeing a person who's never used a Lisa before or a Mac before, and even never used a computer before. It is possible, easily possible, to teach most people to use one of these computers in about 20 minutes. And a lot of that is because you can explain what an icon means, and a person can remember it easily. Your choices of what you might want to do are listed in hidden menus that operate a little bit like window shades. We've written some folders. If, say, you want to store a document or two in a folder, it's analogous to life.
Macintosh icons were evocative of the real world rather than attempting to replicate it on the screen. This led to a much cleaner interface. The Macintosh had many problems, like underpowered hardware with only 128 kilobytes of RAM and the ability to only use one app at a time. But its GUI set the standard for the computer experience. In the decades that followed the Macintosh, we have lived more and more inside our computers and on the internet.
We installed the internet on our computer just a short time ago, and I haven't been able to get the kids off it ever since.
The trend of language influencing the digital has now reversed. The digital world now influences the material world. While visual metaphors like posting still flourish, the internet has given us language like Googling, subtweeting, crypto bro, and unalive. Some linguists, like Adam Alexic, have argued that modern slang is shaped by the algorithms at platforms like TikTok.
Black Mirror thing about TikTok is that they suppress posts with this phrase from appearing on the For You page because they want to prevent you from navigating away from the app. Obviously, they make the most money if they can keep you on the platform for as long as possible, so they'll censor certain words that might take you away from it. But the other side of this is that they'll also incentivize creators to keep you on the app as long as possible by algorithmically prioritizing retention or whether you watch a video all the way through. So now, because our video performance depends on whether you stay on the app, creators have developed this entire arsenal of linguistic techniques to psychologically hook your attention. We'll use superlatives and second-person pronouns. We'll use the influencer accent. We'll use words and phrases that interrupt your scrolling patterns because we have to. In the process, we spread those words and phrases and accents because you learn through observation and all you're observing is TikTok. That's why everybody develops internet slang or TikTok speak so quickly nowadays. It's all a downstream effect of social media platforms successfully dominating our collective attention.
So what does this mean for the future of the GUI? In the 1970s and 80s, the GUI was designed in a top-down process by people who pulled from the language of the world around them to craft a user interface that hasn't changed much till today. Now, 50 years later, this long-held paradigm is about to change. We stand at the precipice of something totally unseen, beyond anything that Steve Jobs or Susan Kare could have ever imagined.
Uncle Phil, come try this.
Not like that. The rise of AI isn't just adding new features to the old interface, it's opening a door to rethink the interface entirely. People are already experimenting with systems that abandon windows, apps, and desktops, replacing them with something fluid, contextual, and alive, interfaces that respond less like filing cabinets and more like collaborators. In some ways, we're back to the 1980s, or back to creation, when Adam was tasked with naming the animals. Maybe one dominant paradigm will emerge, maybe there will be many, but the people designing AI-powered interfaces today aren't borrowing metaphors from office desks and manila folders. They grew up inside the internet itself, inside feeds, memes, prompts, chats, autocomplete, and vibes. That language will echo back through the tools they build. The chain of influence doesn't move in a straight line, it loops. We shape our interfaces and then they quietly reshape how we think, speak, and imagine. The old metaphors taught us how to use computers. The new ones will teach us how to think with them. Only time will tell which metaphors survive.